Hello. Up. Hmm. Miss Mac, excuse me.
Oh, I was on mute.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
Okay. The green rectangle isn't popping up. Oh, but I can see. Okay, so the mic is giving a little green fill now. Whatever happened to that? The green rectangle of, hey, you're speaking. We see you're speaking.
Yeah. I don't know. So I have an Android phone, and now, like, whenever camera or microphone is being used, I get a green dot on the top right corner, and then when I click on it, I get to it expands, and it just basically indicates what things are being used. And I'm so used to it right now. I was looking at a top right corner on my Windows laptop to see what's being used right now.
What does it show? What's being used? Like devices? You're saying, like if your microphone and
Yeah,
camera.
so if my microphone is being used, it will like a green dot will pop up on the top right corner that indicates that, hey, somebody might be listening to you or something like that. Or if my camera is being used, then that green dot also pops up and indicates that camera is being used, so that I'm just aware.
Right. That's nice. I like knowing when things are looking
Yeah.
at me.
Yeah. So
My cat is moving my cursor and clicking keys with her tail, I think. I was just moving
has it
cursor. Was it?
has it ever happened, like, when you don't know your cat is like on the keyboard or something, and then like you are just wondering how this got typed or something happened?
No, I'm pretty good at. I have like a keyboard tray, and so if I'm not using my keyboard for anything, I tend to like shove the keyboard tray in,
Yeah.
and so they can't like walk on it. I do wish that there was like a switch you could throw on a keyboard or something to like disable it. So, like just cat mode. Do you have an animal or something? Have they done that to you?
No, I don't have an animal. I don't have any pets. I was just wondering. I mean, I so most of the time what I've seen is cats are the ones that generally jump onto the chair and keyboards and equipments and stuff. Dogs don't really do that.
Yeah, yeah. Dogs can't jump nearly as well as cats for
Yeah,
whatever reason.
yeah. Sartash is out. So yeah, 3 times.
So we are expecting no Surtash,
Yes.
but Arita joins the chat.
Hello.
Hello, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm all right. Okay, so Rita gets a green rectangle when she speaks.
You do too.
Not on my own computer. So earlier in the meeting, I was like wondering if I was like sending audio because I couldn't see the green rectangle.
Now I can see the green rectangle on your frame.
Really? Okay, now if I switch to gallery view, the rectangle shows up.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Hi, kitten. My cat has decided it's the best pebbles to turn into a loaf and dig her claws into my leg.
So specific.
She's a very specific cat and very painful.
Okay, should we start?
Yeah.
Jay, you want to start?
Yeah. Yeah. So earlier we talked about like coming up with a status schema for VAP and VAPB related errors. I'm not sure if we are still interested in that. I just wanted to hear some thoughts around it, um, to figure out if I should follow up with a design or something.
Is this on constraints, you're saying?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Painting templates, right?
This is let's link the comment in the PR just to give context. Right?
Okay. I'll need to find out about that thread. Then maybe we can push this up to next meeting, and I'll add bit of more context.
But is this about the comment that I added about showing error warning for uh um cell engine, VAP engine, constraint templates that do not meet the conditions? Or is that what you're talking about, or it's different?
Yeah. So earlier, like I do remember, we talked about um, like adding some fields related to VAP errors and under constraint status, uh, besides the error field that we already have. So I should have added more context and found the thread or chat that we did earlier. um, but yeah, that was the gist of it. Like we wanted to.
Okay. Anyway, I put the comment in there just for context. It's just good to have that, otherwise it's hard to follow because
Yeah.
it's right next to the code. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah. I'll look at the comment in a second. Yeah. One general thing that I know about for like status stuff of constraints and constraint templates is at least some of the status schema currently lives in the constraint framework, and it probably should not, uh, because status is, as reported by Gatekeeper, is specific to Gatekeeper, right? And so you could think of different paradigms like Gator or whatever else having different types of status they report, different status reporting mechanisms. So I don't know if this is the right place to do this, but at some point, Gatekeeper should probably fully own the status schema for constraints and templates.
Hmm. Wait, isn't the status part of constraint template and constraint?
It is. So probably what this would look like is, how Gatekeeper ingests the CRD for a constraint template.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it could modify that CRD as part of the ingestion, right? And just inject a status schema. Another option could be to have status as a schemaless object, right? And just have an internal representation of the schema in Gatekeeper for like ease of programming's sake, and just like JSON decode to it. Um, and then for constraints, because the schema for constraint is dynamically generated, again, you could have like a shapeless status field, or you could augment the status schema in the Golang code. It just depends on like how much we care about having a strictly defined schema at the API inside the CRD, whether we want to go through that extra step. Yeah.
Okay, and I just realized Jay, I think you were talking about just errors and warning as part of the status schema, not specifically the thing that I brought up. Okay, sorry about that. I thought it was related. Maybe it is somewhat related, but not the same. Yeah, sorry about that. I misunderstood. Okay, yeah, maybe we could, if we have time today, maybe we can talk about it. But if there are other more urgent things.
Okay, yeah, let's discuss other things first. This we can like do later also. Yeah. So the next thing was that should I cut RC1? Uh,
Yeah.
so either you or Max would need to tag it uh, after I run the action. So
Right.
I'll ping on Slack for pushing a tag. Uh, yeah, and I was wondering. So I was wondering if you guys have any opinions about, like, we all, of course have pub sub mechanism in place. So I was wondering if you guys have any opinion about adding more drivers other than Dapper, uh, and providing additional like way. So pub sub becomes a little heavier to export violations. So maybe if somebody wants to run it. Uh, Run a sidecar or inside of gatekeeper audit and not use pubsub and then just extract logs from files, maybe adding a writing mechanism on audit. What are the thoughts around that?
So if they're running a sidecar and they're looking at logs, like they could look at standard out logs, but it is interesting, this idea that the pub sub driver, like there's no reason the pub sub driver needs to write to pub sub, right? So if someone wanted to create something that instead of writing to pub sub, like persists to disk, like sure. There's a lot of side considerations that would come with that around like rotation, disk usage, whether they want to do uh, flush the write cache after every write, things around like data persistence, consistency, latency, all that stuff. Um, I don't think it's a problem we want to like directly solve. But if someone wants to solve it and has something that has that shape already, right, which is very possible, right, like Logstash and those kinds of things, um, are mechanisms to scrape and rotate logs written by other processes. Uh, why not? Um, I think, at that point it would be on whoever was designing this plugin to come up with the right kind of mechanism in terms of like, what does writing to a different queue, does that actually look like writing to a separate file name? Or is it like a different tag within the log? Is that configurable? That's all stuff that whoever writes the plugin can figure out, which is one of the nice things about plugins.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that is a good example, actually, of just the usefulness of having a generic interface rather than just having a hard dependency on Dapper.
Yeah. So that's a good idea. Instead of like publishing to pubsub, just a driver that would write to a disk instead.
Yeah,
Okay.
and yeah, who knows what other thoughts people may have. I think the one challenge with Golang plugins, obviously, is like Golang itself doesn't handle plugins super well, which is why you have like WebSockets and Linux sockets and interprocess communication. Because like technically Golang can do plugins, but like all the libraries need to be literally on the same version in order as the compiled code you're plugging into in order to successfully like hot load a plugin. Um, yeah, so it's either in practice use interprocess communication or recompile the code with your special plugin that you've written for whatever it is.
Okay.
But this would require the consumer to have like add it as a sidecar. Is that what the current thought is?
Well, I think there's different models. I don't have a hard thought other than the fact that we have an interface here enables these use cases, right? Like if someone wanted to write a driver that would write to a WebSocket, that would mean that a sidecar could be useful, right? If there is some like universal standard that people want for writing to a file, and it turns out like all these like concerns about rotation, space usage, IOPS management, blah, 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 are tractable to solve, and they want to include that as a built-in driver in Gatekeeper. Like, I'm not opposed to that, like maintenance would be a concern to think about. That would still require some kind of sidecar to actually scrape the files and do something useful with them. You know, another sidecar that writes to a WebSocket instead of a pub sub, like why not? That's kind of getting dangerously close to a pub sub, right? And some of the problems that pub sub is solving, but maybe someone wants a UDP stream of events and is okay with dropping a few, and they just want the like data density. Why not?
Or maybe create the uh violations, the policy reports, CRs. That's another option. I know how we don't like the footprint of it for obvious reasons. But maybe that's one option as well.
I mean, yeah, it's something that people could use to create and manage something like that. Like the problem with policy reports isn't anything like it interferes with us. The problem is it does bad things to Kubernetes.
Yeah.
So,
And I
that
think the last time we were looking at the KEP, they were saying how the perf issue is addressed by sharding, I guess.
sharding the report files.
Yeah, something I mean this is so long ago. I don't even keep up with that one.
There is no inherent sharding. Like we need to develop, like whoever writes a plugin for that, they'll need to develop a
No,
sharding.
I'm talking about the actual enhancement that was created to create like a standard for policy reports. But let me dig it up.
Yeah, I would be very surprised if my comments from like years ago have changed, which is like you need a different data store than etcd because like this sort of like recursive, you're going to store the violations created by the system on the system itself when and the scaling that implies, because violations can be larger than the actual size of the original resources. Like you got some operational risk there. Um, it's looking like events in terms of actual like scaling and volume concerns, and events actually does use a different storage system than core etcd in addition to load shedding. If you're using load shedding, I think that limits the sort of usefulness that these reports have, right? Which, if there is a use case for that, fine. So ultimately, yes, sharding at the API level is good, but it's not sufficient because the core concern is the impact that the overall data intensity has on the storage layer of Kubernetes. So, like, there should be some kind of standard that has some sort of data store designed for the kind of information that those policy violations include, which may also be valuable just from like a security use case, right? There's a reason audit logs are written to a separate storage service, and that's to avoid tampering. I could imagine the same kind of thing with security scanning results. Yeah, so the notion of storing this stuff in KRM, fine. The notion of running this stuff through the API server, creating the extra load on the API server and not having like a separate shard, and the notion of storing it on that CD, that's where I'm skeptical. And they've like half addressed the issue by limiting the overall size of the objects by sharding.
So yeah, I just went to the I don't think they addressed your comments. And I think I was assigned to review this on behalf of SIGAUT. Obviously, I haven't done that. So yeah.
Oh, wow, that is my comment. Hey.
Here's your comment. And look, I am assigned to get this across the finishing line. Yeah, let me ping him real quick on the thing. Right, I think that will make sense.
Yeah, so I pasted a link to my comment where I said what I just said in more brief form.
Yeah. That's what I was. Yeah. So let me.
Yeah, particularly if K8s is giving this usage model a big old hug, it should, by like saying, yes, this is a standard we should embrace, then it should have some thoughts on the capabilities of the standard and how it scales.
But ultimately, it comes back to load and like perf and reliability of the cluster, right?
Yeah. And maybe security, like that might be sugar on top, but I think for a large or for a significant subset of users, they may like having a more tamper-proof model. Tamper resistant, excuse me.
Okay, anyway, my worlds are colliding. Great. So back to the write to disk. Do you feel, Jay, do you feel like you have enough to move forward?
Yeah. I
Okay.
think so. One more thought that I had was, rather than like branding as a pub sub, we should brand as an exporter interface, like,
Well,
because there are multiple use cases rather than pub sub, right? Like writing to disk. I mean, so plug in, plug out interface or whatever.
If we do that rebranding, we should put some serious thought into the naming of different principles, like pub sub topics, for instance. Like you want that kind of feature support, but if pub sub topics for pub sub turns into writing to a different file name for this write to disk thing, or maybe appending a different prefix to the log line is another way I could see it working. Topic may still work as like an abstract concept, but we should put some thought into making sure we're not like overfitting on either pub sub or writing to a file, and that we're supporting enough configuration. What would be the right word? Vectors for all the different types of use cases to
So
be
that's where my thoughts were, right. Like earlier I raised a PR to remove flags, which we shouldn't do, by the way, in for PubSub. And so in that PR also, I made changes to include the same information through config map. Right now we are using config maps to create clients for PubSub and whatnot, right, and have information provided that is helpful to create those clients. So we can probably take those channels and topics as a part of that configuration provided by resource rather than flags. So in that sense, like for now we can take the keep the flags as is and maybe deprecate it at some point in time, and then rely on the user to provide everything through the resource itself that is getting created for using this interface.
Yeah, and I think PubSub is still an alpha, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, we are free to kind of like do whatever we want to accommodate sort of our new findings of how this stuff can be used.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think maybe for next call, actually, which I won't be here. But you know, maybe for the next one, if you could kind of like have a doc that describes the experience and what the provider would have to implement, and how that like the provider experience as well as the end user experience, that would be really helpful. And then I think and then we can like maybe work backwards, right? Like, does this belong to PubSub? If so, what does it look like? Okay, maybe it doesn't belong to PubSub. If so, what does it look like, right? So maybe a few different options we can discuss.
Would we also want to like brainstorm different use cases, right? So we have PubSub, we have writing to disk. I'll throw UDP stream in there. You know, I'm not sure if there's others like.
Well, in some sense, like if you think about it, right? Like this is about how users consume the violations, right? So events, if you think about it, like even constraint status, like they're all part of this. So in some sense, you can say like, you know, by default, we'll offer, you know, the status, the constraint status as one default option, right? But users can add more and implement more.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. I'm talking specifically about downstream usages of, for lack of a better word, PubSub driver stuff. Just so that we can get a sense of how it might be used, so we can get a sense of what feature sets may need to be supported. Just like a maximal kind of, let's pretend everyone wants to use this. What would we
I
need
see.
to have to accommodate that?
I think they're back. I think we still have an issue for like someone asked for like a Slack integration.
Nice.
That's
Yeah.
a good pub sub, I think. If you want to call a pub sub, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I'm speaking loosely with PubSub. So like downstream usages of PubSub, sure, but also just like PubSub equivalents, right? Like
Also,
writing.
that's kind of my question, right? Is like, for example, writing to events, is that an example of what you're talking about?
I could see that. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
Like we
that's why I
already,
brought it up, right? Okay.
yeah.
So by that extension, writing to constraint status is also
But that's why I brought it up.
right. Like so,
Yeah.
Oh, no, sorry. Constraint status, I actually would disagree with. Constraint status, constraint template status.
Why is that?
Just because that is a different model, like because it's stateful. Um, like, for instance, errors compiling a constraint template, that's highly coupled with the resource version of the constraint
Well, we're
template.
specifically just talking about the violations spec, not all of status,
Okay.
right? We're
Yeah.
just talking about the violation piece, which is a way we're writing, right? Is one of the channels we're writing to.
Yeah, I could see making that argument. Practically speaking, I'm curious like how that might change things if we like take that literally and modify the audit pipeline to write to this like pub subsystem that then writes to the constraints. Like, yeah.
I mean that drive. So whatever we are doing in audit, let's say hypothetically, if we add a driver to write to Kubernetes resources, right, or constraint status, that driver will do exactly the same thing that's audit doing right now. Just the code will be moved under driver rather than audit.
Right.
I could, yeah, I mean, I could see it. There may be some practical issues around like enforcing the upper limit, right? Stably sorting. There's stuff about the audit pipeline and writing to constraints that is like coupled to the pacing of audit, right? How we create these writers. Like, I don't know, maybe not. Like, I'm just thinking about, like, this is the first time hearing about this, so I'm
Yeah,
like
yeah.
thinking out loud. Yeah.
I mean, we're just brainstorming here. Nothing is written in stone or anything. I mean, and for what it's worth, I'm kind of like, I can see both ways, meaning I really don't want to touch things that already work. Like, please not. Like, this is what broke us in the first place.
That's one on.
Yeah, but the second thing is just because we're not changing it today doesn't mean we shouldn't design it such that we could move it over in time, right? We don't want to have a design that lock us in. So I think that's where my head is at is think about what we have today, how if we were able to move it to this new way, what would it look like and is it possible? And if we can agree that that future is doable, we don't have to do it. It's just, it's doable. I'm happy with it.
Yeah, there's to me a lot of value in being conceptually consistent. Like, yeah,
I
I
know,
don't know if you've
I
ever.
know you. I know you. Yes, that's why I mentioned it. But don't get me wrong. I think conceptually correct is what we strive for in the design, but we should not do that at the expense of practicality. Practicality should always win. If users have a hard time, none of this matters, right?
Okay.
Sorry, I just want to move there's quite a bit of stuff on are you good to go? Do you have any
Yeah.
other?
So I'm just writing down action items
Okay.
for me. Action items. Okay. So one is a doc to see moving writing driver for C status. Looks like, and then this. So I have two things. Like one is to figure out if moving this audit stuff on like writing to constraint status under a driver is feasible or not, and like what would be the process like. And the one more doc is like considering PubSub interface as an exporter interface, and then designing multiple ways to export and how that whole experience will look like from gatekeeper and from provide driver's perspective. Cool.
Sorry if I may, I personally am a bit more interested in what the experience would be, for like, say, write to disk. So if you're short on time, I would
Yeah.
prioritize that over, like, I don't know, like migrating C constraint status.
Yeah.
The other thing I would say is constraint status to me seems a little too non-specific, because when I see that,
Yeah.
I think about like, error ingesting constraint or something, which maybe you mean, but I don't think you mean.
Well, it's just writing violations on constraint status.
But I think he's just saying if we were to migrate it to this new way, what would it look like?
Right. So just like, so we can understand what we meant, like instead of constraints C status X, which I
Experience. Constraint status experience.
writing a driver for violations reporting on constraint status, is that?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I would deprioritize the whole thing, just because realistically, unless it's like really easy to do, I don't see us changing that anytime soon.
Yeah.
Because it works, and also there's probably permissions for who gets to write to constraint status there, now that I think about it. So there's that concern as well. Like you wouldn't want any driver to just like be able to write to actually. So anyway,
well,
yeah, sorry.
the driver would run as gatekeeper, so that wouldn't be so bad. Yeah, I mean, we could fake it too, is the other thing. Like, just because we call it a driver in interface doesn't mean it needs to work as a driver in the code in the short term.
Sure.
Yeah.
Anyway, solve the immediate ask first, which is write to disk, right? Like let's solve for that and make sure the design is generic enough for other scenarios.
Yeah. So, and the last one was that any thoughts about increasing buffer between RC and release to accommodate more testing time, and like if we can do a bug bash in between to figure out, like, to make sure that in changes we are introducing are safe for everybody.
So the context here and the proposal is we used to cut an RC 2 weeks before our release date, but then that reduced down to 1 week, and now we're actually cutting RC on the release date. So and just retrospectively looking at the last few days or weeks, right? I was kind of saying we need a bit more buffer time between RC and release, so we have people who are testing it, because there were bugs that were discovered because we actually tested it, right? So again, so the ask is, should we say let's cut an RC 2 weeks before the release date? That way we give each other and our users 2 weeks to test, and thereby give us time to fix issues.
I can say with confidence, same day is not enough time. Like, we should just cut a release if that's like,
But I think effectively what it means today is we basically delay our release by a week. That effectively, that's what it means.
there should be some soak time. I would delay the release versus like eliminate the soak time personally.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're calling out in -2 weeks, just so that we try, as maintainers, we try to keep our promise for every 3 months, or a release every 3 months. That way it's easier for consumers to follow our schedule, right? That's the thought process. So yeah, so are we okay with in -2 weeks for RC?
Yeah. I just I guess my comment was like, okay, so which one wins, right? If the RC gets cut a bit late, does that mean that we have less soak time, or does that mean that the release gets pushed back?
Oh, I see. I mean, in my opinion, if we're late, then we should just extend. I that should always be, we should strive for the release date, but we're not gonna shorten the soak time for to meet a deadline.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so I think we're on agreement. So let's just write this down. And then the other piece is bug bash, which I kind of like. So one of the proposal was like, let's say if we didn't have any topics in the month in this meeting, could we perhaps use this time just to do a bug bash where maybe like the feature owner will bring a list of things that we should test for, and then we'll just test together, or we could just do it offline and asyncly, doesn't matter.
Yeah, or a mix of the two. Yeah. I like the idea. So I'm just thinking about one of the useful bits of having a bunch of people versus just one person is like the randomness of a bunch of different people making different choices. Yeah, so how much guidance should be given in terms of, hey, you should test these flows versus like, here's the general functionality.
Go wild.
Yeah. There's also maybe a certain amount of like documentation testing that you could get out of being intentionally vague at the cost of like increasing the effort for individual testers, right? Because they would need to like understand things and how to rig up a test, which for something non-trivial like PubSub, where you need a harness to do the testing, right?
Sure.
You need to like set up a PubSub pipeline.
For sure. So I think this is where, maybe like a little bit of help from the feature owner is good. And then the rest is just wildcard, which is actually good, right? Yeah.
I think this may help us improve overall documentation of the website also, like for say, I mean, I am hoping to, because let's say I provide a guidance on how to use this PubSub feature to other maintainers, right? And then you guys follow it, but somehow you face any issues, then that's a point of contention, and we can probably develop a better documentation from that learning, right?
Yeah. I think so. But also in general, I think we should spend some cycles on improving the docs, the website, because we've actually had users telling us like, oh, Gatekeeper doesn't do X, Y, and Z, and then it was like, oh, actually it's in the website, but it was just like hard to find. Yeah. Maybe we could take the next release, the coming release, to work on some of these docs, website related stuff. Okay. All right. Other than that, what else?
We have triage, but I'm not sure if we have enough time for triage now.
Actually, there was something else, right? So I think few of us might be out. Like, Max, would you be around to help with push the tags for release for the not the RC, but like I'll still be here for the RC, but would you be here for 3.17.0?
Like, is that happening this week, next
I think
week?
it's probably a week from today, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay. If it's on a specific day, I may have spotty availability on a specific day that I can't predict. But generally, I should be. Yeah.
Okay.
So early, so it will be probably early next week, right? Like, or mid next week, 20 or 21st August.
Right. Yeah. So if you're fine waiting for odd hours, if it happens to land on an unlucky day, or if there can be like a couple of days wobble, then yeah, for sure, is is what I'm saying.
Okay. And we're good, right?
Cool.
Yeah, soak time at least a week. That's the so yeah, so probably next Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday, whatever. Yeah. Okay. Well, do we want to do triage, or maybe just quickly discuss high level what we want to work on? What do you think? And then in the next few weeks, Jay and Max, if you guys want to keep meeting for triage, that would be great. Let me. I can share my screen if that's easier. I love how we've been delaying this for a while. It's like you can tell how much we want to work on triage.
Well, I think like our development capacity has gone pretty far down, right?
Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, gone down. Yes. Oh, actually, I added this one. I actually wanted to make sure we just take some time to evaluate what is in the latest, not
Is there
that gap.
is there a cap
Map,
for
right?
Yeah.
mutating emission policy right now?
Yeah, it's in, I should not, it's this guy. And I think it's alpha right now, actually. I don't know
Oh,
why my voice just went up. 130.
because
So
of skepticism.
I know. And
Interesting.
so I really think in the next 3 months, it would be great that one of us, and I'm not saying who, should evaluate this and just try to analyze what's the diff between gatekeeper mutating webhook and this one. One is to, sorry?
Yeah, honestly, like if this cap is sufficient, gatekeeper just should not do mutation. Like there's no reason for gatekeeper to do mutation at that point, right? Like for validation, gatekeeper allows for audits, gatekeeper allows for gator evaluation. There's there's no equivalent of audit for mutation, and if there is, convergence is like key there, right? So either gatekeeper. Oh, sorry, and I should also say, because mutation only is functional really as a webhook, generally speaking, right? It's in the admission pathway. It
Well,
just makes good.
yeah, that's kind of why I want to go through it, right? Is let's see what this enhancement offers, what are the gaps, and if there are feedback because it's still in alpha, it's actually a good time for us to give feedback. And if there's an opportunity for us to contribute to it, great. And then we can come back and think about what's the story and roadmap for gatekeeper, right? Like I want to do the exercise and because what if there are things that gatekeeper mutation can do today, but core map cannot do, right? Then to your point, maybe we work with this KEP to add the gap, but address the gap, or maybe it's something that upstream maintainers will say, K8s maintainers will say, no, they will never be part of map for X, Y, and Z reasons. Right.
One thing that comes to mind is right now we have external data support in mutation, right?
I don't think we do really. Actually, no, we don't.
I feel like we
We have referential. Oh, sorry, external, not referential.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, that we do. And that is something that Kate's just probably would not do, because their answer would probably be just use the mutation webhook.
right.
Which is fair. One thing that we are able to do, though, is parallelize the calls for getting referential data. And Kate's can only do sequential.
I mean, we don't have to solve it right now. That's why I put this so we can do the work and discuss it in a future call. Is that okay? Yeah.
Yeah. I'll just one other high level food for thought thing
Sure.
is expansion, like deployments to pods. One thing that mutation does provide is the ability to mock out mutations that will be applied as part of expansion. And that is, I think, useful.
Right.
But that would be honestly more akin to Gatekeeper reading the K8s mutation directives and using those to mock stuff.
Mhm.
If we wanted to preserve that.
Right. Okay, I'm just gonna add it here and let's come back to it. Okay. All right. There's probably plenty of things. So yeah, how do we want to do this? I'm trying to remember.
I think
Oh,
based on we a reaction or
what do we say?
sort based on comments, reactions.
Like this.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Mutation process.
I just wanted to say hello. I'm on the line as well.
Hi,
Hi,
So,
nice to have you.
thank you.
Is there anything you're joining for specifically that we can help you with, or you wanted to?
Yeah, actually, I had a conversation in GitHub with Rita in June, late June, about a issue that I wrote up. It's called source generated within constraint causes Gator verify to fail. It is number 3432.
Okay, 3, 4, what?
3432.
Okay. Cause Gator verify to fail.
So essentially, what I was trying to do was explicitly add source generated to the constraint. And when Gator Verify runs, it would run with the expanded resource, as a pod. Even though I might specify a deployment. And so I guess my question is, should I add this as a feature request or should I keep it as it is?
Forbidden sysctls.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember this one.
Yeah, this is basically, I was trying to use the Gatekeeper library policies, and since a lot of them, their constraint is on the pod itself, we do a lot of our constraints on deployments, any sort of like those sort of resources that create
Okay, I
And
think
this
because
the
verify
underlying.
doesn't have this, so that's
Yeah,
why I said if we wanted this, you would add something like this to the
but
verify.
so we already have expand, right? Like getter expand, which takes expansion template and outputs the resource that would get created through deployment, like, and then you can verify that pod against the policies that exist for pod.
yeah, correct. But I guess how do we handle it with verify then? Because
Yeah, he wants a
um
part of verify.
Oh, okay, okay, yeah.
So what
Because
when
verify
we
is
just
a suit,
add
yeah.
this, when we just add this to verify code, it's the same function we would call.
Yeah, I guess the question would be like if verify, so verify is intended to validate that for a given constraint and template pairing, you see the expected results for a given input object under review. And so I think the question there would be, do we consider the expansion chain something that would want to be part of that verification, or would we expect just like, okay, we can assume expansion works, and we want to, we're just looking at whether the code is valid for a given input. I don't know if I have a strong thought either way there, because on one hand, like if what you really want to do is test the source code of the constraint and template, right, having an unambiguous input is helpful, just to like pinpoint, yes, the problem is in the constraint or template, not in expansion. But you know, it's also kind of like an interesting shift in the imagined use case or user profile of Gator Verify, right? From template authorship to I'm guessing you're using this, like, are you writing the templates or are you writing the constraints, or what is the
Yeah, so we are writing the constraints and templates, and essentially we're doing that by, we have a script that imports the policies into our repository, and then based off of that, we can, add anything else that we want to, if necessary, to it. And so yeah, I guess the idea that I had was, well, if, because Gator test works, like it works the way it's supposed to. Gator expand works, and I was trying to figure out if there was a way where I can, maybe use a pipe where I do Gator expand and then the deployment itself, and then pipe it to Gator tests, right? Or I'm sorry, to Gator verify, and I just couldn't figure out the way, if there was some sort of way I could figure that piece out.
Yeah, I mean, so I suppose if you could expand out to predictable file names, that would work. But yeah, I'm still trying to think through, like, is there any, like, what would be the conceptual concerns one way or the other around expansion inside Gator Verify? Like,
Yeah, and I
obviously,
guess
oh, go ahead.
I'm just saying, I guess I'm just using it more as a way to ensure that the policy, that the constraint template, like you said, is valid, syntactically, and with again against the regular sort of samples that we write of like allowed and disallowed, if it's a pod or a deployment.
I see. And so part of the reason for using deployments is so that you more accurately reflect the kinds of inputs that you're seeing from downstream users, basically.
Exactly.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah. Yeah, I don't think I like, because yeah, if people don't want to use that, like, sort of what this would look like then is that expansion would be another field in the suite, right? You would just like reference some expansion objects.
Yeah.
And if people didn't want that, they could just not use it. Yeah, I don't think I see a problem with that. Jay, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, no, I was thinking about the same. Like we could just add one more field just in suit struct to accommodate expansion template, and whenever that is there, we can run get, because underneath we run getter test, right? In getter verify anyways.
I don't know if underneath we actually run Gator. Like obviously we call the constraint framework at the end.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah. No, like yeah. The only sort of like note of caution I would give is that it does like fuzzy the chain a little bit, right? Like if as I was saying, are you testing the expansion or are you testing the source code? But in some ways, maybe you're testing both, right? If these are
Yeah,
your
that's true.
expansions that, yeah. So it like makes the results, it makes the signal fuzzier, but for you, probably it's still valid signal either way. Like it's not just noise that's being introduced if validation fails, because these are like expansions that you're actually running.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think I'm sold. It's like thank you for coming with this, because it was
Yeah.
like my original sort of like thought for Gator Verify was purely just like how can we assert behaviors are valid, particularly like for
Mhm.
things like what we're doing with migrating some constraints to also having VAP cell flavored source code or constraint templates, right? Like I knew
Mhm.
we would need a unit test that wasn't Rego based in order to run them for both languages. Um, so I wasn't considering this kind of use case, but yeah, no, I don't see a problem with it. I could see some problems for you, maybe in the sense that the suite thing is maybe overly prescriptive, right? Like,
Okay.
is it hard for you then, like if there's changes to the shapes of your inputs, like is it a pain to modify like a bunch of suite.yamls to accommodate whatever?
No, not at all. I
Oh,
mean, I could just like if there's a specific field that I would need to like maybe even say that it is an expanded resource, right? Um, I mean, I'm probably thinking, and this part is like I'm just beginning our gatekeeper journey where, we actually have, 5 or 6 policies. Um, so I mean, it could be something that by default, it's not accepted, it's ran as is. But then if you want to run on expanded resource, it could be with that specific parameter field added.
yeah, okay. Yeah. So yeah, the only like surprising thing to me would be you would need to sort of versus relative to Gator test, right? Gator test, you just throw a bunch of content into the mix and it
Mhm.
like reacts to the content. Whereas this, there needs to be a change to suite.yaml if there's any new file that needs to be read. But yeah, it doesn't sound like that is like surprising or a point of friction for
Mhm.
how you're using it. Okay. Like if there's a novel deployment that a user creates that you hadn't anticipated or something.
Yeah, I mean, I can give an example of like if you want, I can show you something that of like how we're using it.
I mean, I always like examples. I feel like I'm
Okay.
kind of like stretching to find problems because that's just kind of how I think about things, right? Is
Okay.
like, does this break? Try to get to the edge of that. And, if it breaks, does it matter, right? Or are we like really in the weeds when it does break?
Okay. Let me configure before I share.
But I don't know if I'm convincing myself that there's a problem here for anyone that needs to be solved. Other than the problem you're bringing us, obviously.
Mhm. And I'll just show you this one right here. Okay. I think this is it. Let me enlarge it just to be sure. Yeah, there it is. Okay, are you able to see it?
Mhm.
All right. So we're using the read-only root file system pod security policy from the Gatekeeper library. And, here's our suite. We have our location for our templates. The constraint we have as this one that we're using. And then there isn't just your standard allowed. Basically, if it has that specific security context, disallowed, false. And then we have this exempt where if it's based on a specific image, it allows it. And then we have this other whitelist that we're doing on our end that's more customized, where if it's a part of this specific list, don't look at it, basically. And so, yeah, I mean, that's basically it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So you have basically controlled tests of you're almost like testing your constraints more than the templates, and in this one because it's from the open source library, I'd imagine.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. No, it makes sense to me. I'm
Okay.
just this is a new thought.
So we would be kinda adding use case of testing expansion template into getter verify, right? Like if you think from that perspective of testing constraint and constraint status, it would be testing expansion template as well.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's also like an implicit recognition that there's other use cases beyond purely I program templates and I want to make sure the templates work. Cool. So I think we're all in alignment that this is something that can be done. Is there any other discussion here beyond like when/how to actually do it? Okay.
Further for me.
Thank you
So,
for going. Sorry, go on, Jay.
yeah, I was like, so the action item would be to like have a doc or something to add this under, or do we need a doc?
I mean, this is such a light interface change. Like,
Yeah,
unless someone is
yeah.
against add a field that says expansion template file name, and then any debate is going to come down to realistically the name of the field, and that can be done on a PR.
Okay. Okay. So yeah, then it's matter of figuring out when will we have the bandwidth to do this.
This is something that I think I can find someone for. Yeah,
Okay.
because it's pretty well bounded in terms of its
Yeah.
what needs to be done to add it. Yeah. Cool. Because yeah, I am looking for good first issues to kind of help on-ramp people.
Yeah, this
Yeah.
will be.
I mean, in the future, that's something that, I would like to be able to do as well. Is I just want to make sure that I have my Golang in the right place, my understanding of everything. Like I've taken some online courses, done some practice projects and stuff like that. I feel like I'm almost there where I can start contributing. And so, like maybe probably another 6 months or so, maybe, I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And so, like, we definitely welcome contributions. It sounds like maybe you prefer earlier than 6 months if this was able to be delivered.
Yeah, if possible. I mean, we've been working around it, but yeah, I mean,
Yeah, let me see. I think I have coworkers that have cycles, so I can probably get someone to write this.
Okay.
Let's call it order of a month before there'd be a PR. Don't hold me to that.
yeah.
But,
Thank you.
yeah,
I really appreciate it.
yeah, thank you. Cool. Anything else we wanted to discuss, or shall we end it negative 14 minutes?
Yeah, I'll move triage to next one.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, nothing else.
Cool.
Cool.
Well, it's good to see you all.
Yeah.
Yep. Thank you.
Bye. Bye.
Thank
Take
you.
care.